Good morning, all. Ryan S. Pratt here. Going to read another chapter of Shepherd's Quest, Book 1 of the Broken Key Trilogy, doing Chapter 13 with commentary. Now, a little background here. Ryan and Chad have gone to Wardeen. They've taken their coins that they found in the crypt, and they went to the fence Thier, one of Bart's friends, and he gave them 55 gold pieces for all of their silver coins. Now they're heading back home. Bart and Ryan's mother, of course, fought off the intruder who tried to kill Bart. Then now they're just kind of hanging out there. Freya is upset about her betrothal to Rupert. Has set the date 1 year away, so Ryan's got a little bit of time to see about getting the love of his life to be his instead of Rupert's, which would just make everybody unhappy. Nobody would be happy with that, and ultimately Freya's father would come to see that was not a good match. But all he can see is son of the magistrate, rich, well-to-do, and a lot of people just see that is the basis of a good marriage. And I don't think it is. I mean, it helps, but for the most part, I think the richer people are, the less happy they become. Maybe that's because I've never been rich, and I don't have that perspective. Anyway, here's chapter 13. "Why did you stay on the road?" exclaimed Chad quietly from where he sat on the horse behind Ryan. "We can lose them in the hills," Ryan replied. They leaned low in the saddle as they fled across the countryside. A short time ago, 3 bandits accosted them, and it was only through great luck that they managed to get away. Now the bandits were hot on their trail. Ryan had turned off the road and begun heading through the rolling hills. "Are they still there?" asked Ryan. Chad glanced back and saw that they had only a couple 100-foot lead on them. "Oh yeah," he replied. "I think they're gaining." Which wasn't too surprising, seeing as how Chad and Ryan were riding double. I'm going to say road double. I'm trying to get away from all those wheres and was and things. And which wasn't too surprising, seeing as how Chad and Ryan rode double and the bandits were not. How about did not? "We're not going to be able to stay ahead of them." "I know," Ryan acknowledged. Not too far ahead stood the tree line where the forest began. He hoped that if they could make it to the trees before the bandits closed the gap, they might have a better chance of escaping. Chad saw where Ryan was taking them and silently agreed that it was their best shot. They hadn't even considered putting up a fight, since all they had for weapons was a sling that Ryan always carried with him and a couple belt knives. At the moment, the sling was buried at the bottom of his pack. The bandits, on the other hand, were equipped with swords, knives, and one even had a shield secured behind his saddle. Any stand they were to make against such armed men would prove futile. Keeping low in the saddle, they urged their horse in maintaining as fast a pace as it could. The bandits behind them continued to advance to slowly gain ground until they reached the forest. By that time, the gap between them had been reduced to a mere 100 feet. Ryan maneuvered between the boles of the trees, but initially was unsuccessful in putting any more distance between themselves and the bandits. From behind, they heard one of the bandits yell, "Give it up! You'll never get away!" Do you think that ever works? I've thought about that lately. Cops always say, "Stop," or people say, "Stop," and "Stop, you'll never get away, halt." But do they? I don't think they ever do, so why say it? All it's going to do is make the person know that you're hot on their trail and going to make them run faster. I don't know what the psychology is behind that. Anyway, that has nothing to do with this. Overhanging limbs struck them as they raced between the trees, and bushes were beginning to impede their progress. When their forward momentum began to diminish, Ryan started to think that this hadn't been such a smart idea. Fortunately, though, the bandits were just as hampered in their movement as they were. Ryan finally came to the conclusion that escape was going to be impossible, so it was time to get creative. "Get my sling out of my pack," he hollered at Chad. Then he ducked just as a thick branch loomed up in front of him. Behind him, Behind him, he heard Chad grunt when he wasn't quick enough to avoid the obstacle. "I'll try," he said as he rubbed the red spot on his forehead. As they maneuvered between the trees, Chad untied the top of Ryan's pack and dug through it until he felt one of the straps of the sling. "Got it," he said, just as the horse jumped over a fallen log. Chad hadn't been prepared and was almost thrown from his back. When he felt himself sliding off, he grabbed onto Ryan with a death grip and managed to right himself. Handing the sling to his friend, he said, "Here." Ryan reached back and took the sling. "Now, get 5 of the gold coins out." "Why?" he asked. "Just do it," Ryan insisted. He felt Chad begin to rummage through the pack again. While he dug out the coins, Ryan began scanning the forest ahead for what he wanted. "We better do something quick," said Chad. "They're almost upon us." Ryan turned his attention from the forest ahead to the bandits behind. What had been over 100-foot lead had shrunk to 3/4 of that. "I know," he replied, "working on it." He turned back to the forest ahead and finally saw what he sought. "There's a clearing up ahead," he told his friend. "Once we're halfway through it, toss the gold coins to the ground. Make sure they land somewhere visible." "You think they're going to stop for the coins?" he asked. "With any luck, yes," he replied. "We're almost there. Get ready." Chad looked over his friend's shoulder and saw the clearing approaching. Through the trees, it appeared as a beacon of light in the dark forest, seeing as how the sunlight was able to breach the canopy of leaves. Ryan braced himself as the horse leapt across another fallen log, and entered the clearing. It wasn't big, just a small area where it looked like wild animals came to graze. The clearing was primarily covered with grass, though a few wild bushes erupted here and there. "Now, Chad," hollered Ryan as they came to a spot slightly more barren than the rest. Chad tossed the coins so they landed upon the ground, and the barren area around the barren area a split second before the bandits entered the clearing behind them. Then Ryan and Chad reached the far side. They glanced back and saw that 2 of the bandits had indeed stopped to pick up the coins, while the third continued the chase. "It didn't work," hollered Chad. "It worked well enough," countered Ryan. Then they were back in among the trees. "Here," said Ryan as he handed the reins to Chad. "What are you planning on doing?" "Something stupid, I'm sure," was the reply. Ryan saw a thick branch hanging across their path 2 feet above their heads. It was perfect. Just before they drew close to it, Ryan took his right foot out of the stirrup and placed it on the saddle beneath him. "You're crazy," Chad yelled when he realized what he was about to do. Ignoring his friend, Ryan braced himself and then leapt from the back of the horse when they reached the branch. He sailed through the air and grabbed the overhanging branch. The force of the impact scraped several inches of skin off his forearms before he was able to stop himself. A quick glance back showed the pursuing bandit drawing his sword as he looked at Ryan hanging from the branch. Swinging up, he got on the top of the branch just as the sword struck the wood right where he had been hanging a moment before. As the bandit pulled a blade from the branch, he reached for another one higher up in the tree and pulled himself even farther out of the bandit's reach. He glanced down at the bandit, who was still at the bottom of the tree, then off to where Chad had disappeared in the forest. At least he got Chad out of this, now to save himself. Taking his sling out from where he had stuffed it in his shirt, he contemplated what he was going to do. From the direction of the clearing, he could hear the other 2 bandits making their way toward their partner. The only ammunition he had for the sling were the coins in his pack. Reaching into it, he didn't have his pack in his pouch. There you go. Reaching into it, he removed one of the copper coins they had found in the crypt. Placing it in the cup of his sling, he set it himself against a tree's trunk as best he could. In all the times he spent practicing this sort of thing while watching the sheep, he never once tried it from the top of a tree. If he ever got out of this and had the time, he may put in some practice. "Come on down," the bandit said from atop his horse. "You got nowhere to go." Either the bandit didn't realize that Ryan had a sling, or he didn't care, for he made no effort to avoid the attack. Ryan got the sling up to speed quickly, then released the coin. It flew down and struck the bandit in the face. With a cry, the bandit fell off his horse backward. Blood flew everywhere, and when he stood back up, Ryan could see the coin embedded where his nose had once been. The man shrieked in pain as blood poured from the wound. Ryan didn't want to give him a chance to recover, so he got another of the coins into the sling's cup and launched it. This one struck the bandit on the side of the head, and when he fell to the ground, he didn't get it back up. Okay. Yeah. Riyan did have his pack. They were both wearing their packs. And when he leapt up, it was on his back. It was on his back when he leapt up. Yeah. So he was wearing his pack. So yeah, he could have got, yeah. The coin came from his pack. Of course, you could argue, why does he still have coins from the crypt? Because why didn't he just trade those? Trade in the few silvers he had left as well. I thought about that, and I could change it to where it's just plain copper coins. But if you think about it, those copper coins, they're not worth that much, but they're a great memento souvenirs, you could say, of his great first exploration of a dungeon. So I think he kept them because he just wanted them. I didn't specify that, but I think it could be argued that, in case someone ever says, well, they traded him in there. How on earth does he have him? Just a little short time later. Well, there you go. That's the reason. Because when he traded him in at Thayer's, all they traded in was the silver. They didn't trade in the coppers, and the bulk of the copper is still in that chest in the crypt, because they had put the copper in the in the chest before they went down to the final level. And when Bart was struck with that, they didn't have time, and they didn't want to deal with the weight of hauling them all the way back. So all those hundreds and hundreds of copper coins are still in that chest in the crypt. All right. The man shrieked in pain as blood poured from the wound. Riyan didn't want to give him a chance to recover, so he got another coins in the sling's cup and launched it. This one struck the bandit in the side of the head, and when he fell to the ground, he didn't get back up. By this time, the other two bandits had arrived. They saw their partner lying on the ground dead. Then they turned their attention up to where Riyan stood in the tree. "We're going to get you, kid," one of them threatened. Dismounting, they went to the base of the tree and began climbing up. I have a lot of too big paragraphs. First one began to climb, then the other. From his position, Riyan was unable to get a good shot at them. They were much too close to the trunk for his shot to be effective. There were too many branches in the way. Then from out of the forest behind the men climbing the tree, Riyan saw Chad approaching. In his hand, he held a 4-foot branch. One end was sharp and jagged from where Chad must have broken it off. Unnoticed, he came up behind the bandit closest to the ground, and with all his might, stabbed him in the back with the branch. The years of hauling grain sacks and barrels of flour at the mill paid off, for when the stick struck, it pierced the man's back and went all the way through, exiting from the other side. Blood spurted out of the man's chest as the jagged end of the stick emerged. The man didn't even cry out. The blow must have killed him instantly. All the blood spurting I have in my books. Do I no longer have a PG-13 rating? Am I pushing an R with all the gore? Oh, it is what it is, I guess. As the man fell from the tree, Chad jumped backward to avoid the dead man collapsing on him. Then from above, he heard the last bandit yell as he leapt from the tree toward him. Backpedaling quickly, Chad got out of the way. The man landed with sword in hand. Chad could see the hate for him burning in his eyes. Giving out with an inarticulate cry, the man charged with his right hand holding the sword high. He could see that the man intended to cleave him in two. Chad kept moving backward until his heel hit a root and he fell to the ground. There was no time to do anything but brace for the sword stroke that would end his life. But just before the sword fell, the bandit cried out and sank to his knees. His left hand reached behind him as if he was trying to get something. Chad watched quite perplexed until he saw something shiny fly from the tree wherein Riyan stood and strike the bandit. This time the blow knocked the bandit to the ground and he lay there crying out in pain. Chad could see the man's back was covered in blood and was obviously in agony. He glanced up to find Riyan hopping down out of the tree. Riyan stopped next to the man with a stick through his back and pulled the stick free. Now, if anyone ever has any comments about editing or the way I word things, feel free to mention it. I have no problem with that. I may not change, but what sounds right to me may not. I might be convinced otherwise. That's always the case. Like my mother, when I first started writing, her thing was "got." She hated that word. She absolutely hated the word. I got this, or you got whatever. And so you might notice that I really don't use that word much because she kept pounding it into my head. I don't use that word much. Then he carried it back. Okay. Ryan stopped next to the man with a stick through his back and pulled the stick free. Then he carried it over to where Chad stood over the man writhing on the ground. Can't let him suffer, Ryan said. Even though the bandit would have most likely killed them, he couldn't leave the man to suffer. So, taking the stick in both hands, he held it aloft over his head for the briefest moment before plunging it into the man and silencing his cries. Are you okay? Ryan asked as he turned to his friend. Yeah, nodded Chad. You? Just a few scrapes, he said. What should we do with them? Chad asked as he gazed at the dead bandits. Then it suddenly hit him. He and Ryan had fought off 3 vicious bandits and prevailed. Our first real battle, he announced. I guess you could call it that, agreed Ryan. Grinning, he patted Chad on the back. We make a great team, and as for what to do with them, I say leave them for the animals. No point in letting the horses and equipment go to waste, though, suggested Chad. Absolutely not, agreed Ryan. To the victor go the spoils. So, they just killed 3 guys. First time they've killed anybody. And they don't seem too upset by it. Our modern sensibilities, I would think, would really find a problem with that. And some people say that like James is a maniacal killer who just kills everybody, and that's all there is. Well, I think for Ryan and Chad, it's their way of life. It's their I don't mean killing is their way of life. It's just that they're a lot rougher, more I guess primitive than we are, and so yeah, I don't think that they would kill just to kill, but if they're defending themselves, they have no problem killing somebody. I probably wouldn't either. While Chad went to retrieve Ryan's horse from where he had left him, Ryan set about gathering the 3 bandits' horses together. Then he went to one of the bandits by the tree and removed the man's sword belt from around his waist. Strapping it on around his own, he pulled forth the sword and filled every inch of the hero. The sword itself was rather plain, more for utility than anything else. It had a straight blade that would be considered a longsword, with a plain, unadorned crossguard and hilt. Still, it was the first sword Ryan had ever held, and he felt great holding it. When Chad returned with his horse, he found Ryan swinging the sword back and forth with a grin on his face. Chad, of course, had to have one for himself, so he went and removed one from another and strapped it around his waist. It definitely took some getting used to. The scabbard kept trying to trip him up, and the whole thing weighed quite a bit more than expected. These might come in useful, Ryan finally said after sliding his sword back in the scabbard. He pulled the handle away that he used to guide the blade as it slid into the scabbard. Blood welled from a cut he had given himself as the sword slid in. If we don't kill ourselves with them first, agreed Chad, we don't know the first thing about using a sword. What's there to know? Asked Ryan. You just get close to an enemy and stick 'em. Chad looked at his friend doubtfully. I think there's a bit more to it than that. Ryan grinned and shrugged. Let's see what they have on them and then head home. Other than a few copper coins and a single silver, the bandits didn't have much of what you would call treasure. Ryan was disappointed. For in the sagas, bards always told, whenever the hero killed a bandit or some other foe, the dead usually held a magical item or maybe a map, something. Needless to say, he was a bit put off. He did use one of the bandits' knives to remove the coins from their bodies that he had slung at them. That part was a bit grisly, but he didn't want to leave anything behind. They also retrieved the gold coins they had dropped in an attempt to slow the bandits down. At least we aren't going to have to ride double anymore, Chad stated. Thank goodness, replied Ryan. No offense, but I was getting tired of you hanging on to me. Oh, and like I enjoyed smelling your wonderful odor for so long? The two friends stared at each other, and then they both erupted in laughter. Let's get out of here, he said. I think part of the whole laughter part is that they're coming down off the adrenaline rush. They're just glad to be alive. They're glad to have survived, and they're on a euphoric high from just being alive when they were thinking that they wouldn't be alive. And frankly, if bandits are coming after you, I've always thought if someone goes after your stuff, they've entered into a contract, and that contract states they're going to try to take your stuff, and then you're going to try to stop them in any way that you can. Me, I'm an old fat guy. Well, not fat, but I am overweight. I'm out of shape. I've never fought a person in my life. I'm really quite a peaceful person. So I would have to, if someone broke into this house, I wouldn't hesitate. I would take them out with everything I have, because movies. You always watch movies. The good guys always want to keep everyone alive. We can't be like them. And then invariably they have to fight them over again and again and again, and someone else will die because they didn't want to kill this person off in the first place. So I just say, just take them out. Is that bloodthirsty? Well, not necessarily. I've got an old mother in my house. I'm not a fighter. If they got the upper hand, we'd both be dead. So, yeah. We have guns in this house. We live in the country. Everyone around this area is armed. That's why there's really no crime in this area. You don't hear of anyone being broken into. No house in this area, as long as I can remember, has ever been broken into. Why? Because you walk through these doors and there's a gun. There's a redneck in this house, or in these houses around here, with guns, and they would just be happy to use them on you. So yeah, there is no crime here in this, well, not in the rural area. I mean, in town there is, but that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, rural people, you don't break into their house because you may not come back from that. They mounted, then each took the reins of one of the two remaining horses and tied them to the rear of their saddles. Once the two spare horses were secured, Riyan led them out of the forest. Chad suggested they take the back way to Ryan's house so no one in town would see them arriving with the horses. Just their luck, they would run into Rupert, who would probably take them. It was a little before dinner when they finally arrived at Ryan's home. When Bart and Ryan's mother saw them arriving with 3 extra horses and swords at their hip, they knew something must have happened. While they put the horses into the barn, Chad and Riyan explained what happened. They didn't go into detail as to why they had been in Wardeen, and they definitely made no mention of the coins or the king's hoard while Ryan's mother was with them. Then it was Bart and Ryan's mother's turn to tell them of the man who showed up to kill Bart. It was well past dinner before both parties had finished relating their different adventures. Ryan's mother mentioned that Frey had stopped by, but didn't say much more than that. Later that night, after Ryan's mother had gone to bed, the 3 friends stayed up late in the front room. It was at that time that Bart told them of the conversation he overheard and Frey and Ryan's mother had. Now, instead of saying Bart told them the conversation he overheard Frey and Ryan's mother had, I'm going to say overheard between Frey and Ryan's mother. I think that just flows better. So, they won't be getting married for a year, he summed up once he finished. That might be enough time, Riyan said as he glanced at Chad. Time for what? Asked Bart. To find the rest of the key and open the king's hoard, he stated quietly. King's hoard? Yes, replied Chad. It's... He and Riyan then filled Bart in on what they had learned from Thyr. Once they were done, Riyan said, I intend to find the rest of the key and open it. With the treasure inside, Freya's father would have to agree to let his daughter break off the engagement with Rupert in my favor. There's but one minor problem, said Bart. What? Riyan asked. You don't know where the rest of it is, he explained. What we have could be the missing fragment from the whole, or it could be one of many scattered in a dozen different places. He paused a moment as he glanced from one to the other. From what you said Thyr told you, people have been searching for this place for centuries. I know, but we have something they don't, he stated. We have a part of the key. Plus, we've been in the crypt and seen the seal protecting the king's hoard. That's true, Bart, added Chad. He glanced at them both and could see they were dead set to do this. Sighing, he indicated for them to follow and said, "Come with me a second." Leading them to Ryan's room, he went to the closet and removed the piece of the golden key from his pack. He showed them the map on the one side and the spot he believed indicated a town of some sort. This is the only place on this map that shows something other than geographic representations. It has to mean something. "Are you saying the rest of the key is there?" asked Ryan. Bart shrugged. "I don't know," he admitted. "But if you are going to go in search of the rest of the key, it's as good a place as any to start." "But we still don't know where that place is," said Chad. "True," nodded Bart. "There was a large map of the surrounding area in the magistrate's office," Chad suddenly said. "Maybe we could see if this place is on that map." "Good idea," agreed Ryan. "We could go down in the morning and take a look." Chad nodded and then grew silent. After a moment, he said, "Somehow, I need to figure a way to talk to my mother about getting the grinding stones. Talk to my mother about the grinding stones and give her the coins that they need. I could find Errol in the morning and discover whether your father will be at the mill or not," offered Bart. "That would be great. Then if he is, I could go pay a visit to my mother." Chad felt better now that he knew that he was one step closer to helping his family and hopefully mending the rift that was between himself and his father. Chad and Bart spent the night at Ryan's place. They crashed in the front room while Ryan took back his bed from Bart. In the morning, when they told Ryan's mother that they were heading into town, she asked about the sheep. "Your friend Davin hasn't been taking them out much," she said. "They really need to graze." "I know," Mother replied, "but this is more important right now." She gave him a look saying that she didn't agree but wasn't about to argue the point. He felt guilty. He knew that she counted on him to help with the sheep, and he couldn't help but feel that he was letting her down somehow. "I'll take them out this afternoon, okay?" "See that you do," she said. Feeling somewhat better now that she'd been mollified, he and the other two left and headed into town. Ryan thought about wearing his sword, but decided against it. If he were to be seen wearing a sword around Quillim, it would have raised too many questions he didn't want to answer. The first thing they did was to hunt down Errol. Finding Chad's brother wasn't too difficult, and when asked, he explained that their father would be at the mill until lunchtime. He was working to prepare the wooden framework for the 2 wheels that were coming in later this week. "How's Mother doing?" Chad asked. "Fine," replied his brother. "She's sad about all that's going on. I hope things can work out again." "Me too," Chad assured him. "I'm going home now to talk to her." "Good luck," Errol wished him. "Thank you," replied Chad. They left Errol where he was playing with several other youths of similar age and headed directly to Chad's home. Despite what his father said, he still felt that it was his home too. Making their way through the streets, they kept a lookout for Rupert, but he and his 3 buddies were nowhere to be seen. Before they reached Chad's home, another young man that lived in town saw them passing through and moved to intercept them. "Bart," the young man said, There's been a stranger in town asking about you." "Yeah, I heard," replied Bart. "We just got back." "He was kind of strange," Agreani replied. Agreani was the son of the local baker. He wasn't as close to Chad and Ryan as he was to Bart, though he'd had more dealings with Chad due to the fact that his father bought flour from Chad's father. Bart came to a stop as he talked with the Agreani. "You two go on ahead," he said. "I'll catch up." "All right," Ryan said as he and Chad continued on toward Chad's home. It didn't take long before they arrived. Chad's mother was outside drawing water from the well when she saw them approaching. Leaving the bucket sitting on the ground, she turned toward them and waited for her son to approach. Chad was filled with uncertainty when he saw her. He wasn't sure just how she was going to react to him after everything that's happened. Coming close, he said the only thing he could. "I'm sorry, Mother," and then gave her an embrace. She returned it with feeling, and when they broke it off, had tears in her eyes. "Oh, Chad," she said, "why did you go against your father's wishes?" He felt bad. "I was just trying to help," he replied. "I didn't mean to make the situation worse." "I know," she said. "How's father?" he asked. "Not good," she told him. "Emotions got the better of her and it took a minute to get them under control. He hasn't changed his mind about you." "I realize that," stated Chad. "How much are the 2 new grindstones going to set him back?" 50 gold, she replied. "We had 20 saved against adversity, and those are already gone. The magistrate was good enough to loan us the rest. He said that it wouldn't do for Quillim not to have an operable mill." 50? He asked, incredulous. That amounted to a veritable fortune by the standards of those in Quillim. He was surprised that his family had actually managed to squirrel that away 20. So if you think about it, if it was 50 for the two, 55, 50 for the two, then it'd have been 25 for the one, or around that. And if they already had 20, then they really would have only been indebted to the magistrate for 5 gold pieces. And if they've managed to save 20, then they could have paid that back. So Chad didn't need to get the scroll, as it turned out. And all that has happened was pretty much pointless, at least from his father's point of view, because his father had it covered. But Chad didn't trust that his father did. Chad, being a teenager, knew better. And his father, of course, didn't explain to his son about all this money, because the more people that know about how much money you got, the more likely someone's going to come and try to steal it. So, yeah, it just went around in circles, and everything's always about teenagers screwing up. She nodded. I know. I don't know how we'll ever pay him back. Yeah, because now, they had the 20, which they probably saved over the course of years, right? Now, that's gone. They have no extra at all, and they're indebted even 30 more. But fortunately, Chad's got, 55 in his pack right now? So, that's one problem solved. Chad glanced at Riyan, who nodded. Before they left, they had placed all the gold coins they had received from Thyr into his pack. I have something for you and father, he said, to make up for what I did. She looked at him questioningly, then he opened his pack and showed her the gold inside. When she showed her the gold. Remove that inside. When she looked inside and saw the shining gold coins, she had a sharp intake of breath. Oh my, she said, how many are in there? 55, he replied. We found some gems up in the mountains while we were camping and sold them in Wardeen. Me, Riyan, and Bart have decided to give you and father what is needed to replace the grinding wheels. You can't be serious, she exclaimed. Oh, Chadric. Tears began to flow unbidden as she sobbed in happiness. Will father accept this? Chad asked. I know how proud he is about some things. I think he will, she said, but it might be best if I tell him. If you were to be here, he might get his back up and no amount of logic would sway him. You can stay at my place, offered Riyan. That would be best, she said, at least for now. They went inside the house and removed the 50 coins from the pack. When Chad's mother was about to pick up the water bucket to take it back into the house, Riyan beat her to it and carried it inside for her. Once inside, Chad removed the coins and stacked them on the table. I hope this makes things better between father and me, he said. I'm sure it will, she replied. But even with this, it may take time for things to be as they were. I know. Chad gave her a hug before he and Riyan took off to the magistrate's office. Send Earl to Ryan's if things change and I can come back. I will, she said, as fresh tears began to course down her face. I love you, Mother, Chad said after another hug. I love you too, she replied. When at last she was able to release her son, he and Riyan left and headed over to the magistrate's office. Chad was awfully quiet as they made their way back through town. You okay, Riyan asked. Better, he replied. If my father forgave me, then I will be. He really didn't realize how much he cared about the way his father felt about him until losing his goodwill. Now he almost felt empty inside and knew that only regaining his father's favor would fill it. They encountered Bart, who was on his way to meet them at Chad's family's home. Everything go all right? He asked. Won't know that until Earl comes with word, Riyan replied. I'm sure it's going to work out for the best, Bart said reassuringly as they approached the town hall and the magistrate's office. When they entered, they stopped to see Cece and asked if they could see the magistrate. I'm sorry, Riyan, she replied. He and Rupert went up to Yarrick's and won't be back for 3 days. Yarrick's was a small town less than a day's ride to the north. It, too, was a small town of herders and farmers like Quillim. Thank you, he said. Once they were outside, Riyan said under his breath, 3 days! Don't worry, Riyan, Bart said. We're going to get in and see that map before then. What do you mean, he asked. Cece isn't about to allow us to go poking around his office while he's out. I know, he replied with a grin, but if you don't want to wait 3 days, I do have another idea. Riyan glanced at his friend and asked, what? And that ends chapter 13. Well, obviously we know what Bart's planning, right? since he's already broken into Rupert's room, right? We know he's a thief. He picks locks, so obviously they're going to do some late night work. Well, that ends chapter 13. Tomorrow I'll read chapter 14. For those up on my girlfriend and her surgeries, well, she got a 360 infusion. 3 days ago on Tuesday, she went in and they did the first half of the surgery. It took 4 hours. Then yesterday, Thursday, they did the second half, which took 5 hours. I haven't talked to her since. Well, I had thunderstorms rolling all night long, and my internet was out, and she was groggy. So I sent her a bunch of messages when I could, and this morning she replied to them. So we'll see how she's doing today. I'm sure hoping that this surgery really helps her. My FAQ, I did 2 more yesterday. I had some good questions for people, and I got replies up right away. So if you have any questions about anything, Morsai Saga, any book I have, feel free to post them, and I will get an answer up as best I can. Now, I'm not the greatest orator. That's why I'm a writer. I really didn't speak much when I was younger, and so sometimes talking is a chore for me. But I do the best I can. And so, chapter 14 tomorrow. Hope to have a good day. Talk to you later.